The door had barely opened when Daniel Ortiz froze mid-step, his hand still pressed against the cold brass handle, his heart slamming against his ribs like a fist against glass. There, in the middle of the grand living room he had grown up in, his mother stood with her finger jabbing toward his pregnant wife's face, her voice sharp enough to cut through marble. He had come home early to surprise her. Instead, he was about to witness the moment that would shatter his family into pieces and rebuild it into something stronger than it had ever been. If you believe in second chances, in the quiet strength of people who refuse to be broken, and in stories that remind us what family truly means, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Humanity Tales so you never miss a story like this one. 6 months earlier, Alina had walked into this mansion as a bride, not born into wealth but chosen for her heart. Daniel had fallen for her the moment she laughed at one of his terrible jokes at a small cafe, unimpressed by his last name or his family's fortune. She was a school teacher, humble and warm, the kind of woman who remembered the names of every student's siblings and who never once asked Daniel what his net worth was. His mother, Margarita, had never forgiven either of them for that. From the very first dinner, Margarita made her disapproval a quiet war. She corrected Alina's table manners in front of guests, questioned her choice of words, and reminded her, subtly but constantly, that she did not belong among people who had built empires. Daniel had tried to shield his wife, but work often called him away for weeks at a time, overseeing construction projects in cities hours from home. Every time he left, Margarita's cruelty sharpened, like a blade left too long against a stone. When Alina became pregnant, Daniel believed it would soften his mother's heart. A grandchild, he thought, could mend anything. Instead, it seemed to deepen Margarita's resentment. She began spreading quiet doubts among the household staff, hinting that Alina had trapped her son, that the baby was a calculated move rather than a blessing. Alina heard the whispers but said nothing, choosing instead to protect the peace of her marriage rather than fuel a fight she could not win alone. The morning Daniel left for what was supposed to be a 5-day business trip, Alina stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the long driveway, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other pressed against the glass as if she could hold on to him a little longer. She did not know that same afternoon, Margarita would summon the entire household into the living room, including Alina, under the pretense of discussing wedding anniversary plans for the family estate. What followed was not a conversation. It was an execution. Margarita, dressed sharply in yellow as if color alone could announce her power, opened an old box of documents and photographs in front of everyone. She accused Alina of forging affection, of marrying Daniel only after learning about the family's holdings, and demanded she sign papers relinquishing any claim to family assets before the baby was even born. She humiliated her in front of the housekeeper, the gardener, and even Alina's own younger sister, who had come to visit and now stood frozen near the doorway, too afraid to speak. Alina's voice trembled as she tried to defend herself, her hand instinctively curling protectively over her stomach, tears gathering but refusing to fall, because she had promised herself long ago that she would not give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her break. It was at that exact moment, with Margarita's finger raised and her voice ringing through the marble hallways, that Daniel returned. His flight had been rescheduled, and he had rushed home hopping to surprise Alina with an early homecoming and a small gift for the nursery tucked under his arm. Instead, he stood in the doorway, gift forgotten, watching his mother tear down the woman he loved in front of people who worked in his own home. Something inside Daniel went cold and clear all at once. He was not a man prone to shouting, but the sight of Alina's trembling shoulders and the fear behind her eyes ignited something he had never felt before. He stepped fully into the room, and the silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Margarita turned, momentarily startled, quickly rearranging her expression into something softer, something rehearsed for her son's benefit. But Daniel had already seen the truth, unfiltered and raw, and there was no rearranging that could undo it. He walked past his mother without a word and went straight to Alina, gently placing his hand over hers on her stomach, asking if she and the baby were all right. Alina, overwhelmed by the sudden relief of not being alone anymore, finally let the tears fall, not from weakness but from the release of months of silent suffering. Daniel turned to his mother then, and for the first time in his life, he spoke to her not as her son seeking approval, but as a husband defending his family. He told her that Alina was not a stranger to be interrogated in her own home, that the baby growing inside her carried his blood and his name, and that any more cruelty aimed at his wife would be aimed at him as well. Margarita, unused to being challenged, tried to justify herself, claiming she only wanted to protect the family legacy. But Daniel reminded her, his voice steady despite the storm inside him, that legacy meant nothing if it cost him the people he loved most. He told her that respect was not something the family fortune could buy, and that if she could not offer Alina basic dignity, she would not be welcome in the home he and Alina were building for their child. The staff who had witnessed the humiliation now watched something remarkable unfold. A son standing taller than his family's reputation, a husband choosing love over legacy. Margarita's eyes, for the first time, showed something other than pride. There was fear in them, fear of losing her only son, fear of a future where she might not know her own grandchild. In that fragile silence, Daniel offered her a choice, not an ultimatum born of anger, but a genuine invitation to change, to see Alina not as a threat but as family. Weeks passed, and the mansion slowly began to feel different. Margarita, humbled by nearly losing everything that mattered, started showing up at family dinners with quiet gestures instead of sharp words, small offerings like homemade soup for Alina during difficult pregnancy days, or simply sitting beside her without judgment. It was not an overnight transformation, but Alina, ever gracious, gave her the space to grow, understanding that people are capable of change when finally confronted with the truth of their own actions. When their daughter was born on a warm spring morning, Margarita was the second person allowed to hold her, right after Daniel. As she cradled the tiny girl in her arms, tears she had never allowed herself to shed in front of others finally fell, quiet and real. She looked at Alina, really looked at her, and for the first time whispered a genuine thank you, not for marrying her son, but for the strength she had shown, for teaching an old woman that love cannot be measured by bloodlines or bank accounts, only by the willingness to stay and to forgive. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share it with someone who believes, like we do, in second chances and the quiet power of love that refuses to give up. And before we go, we have one small request. If you have ever witnessed someone find the courage to stand up for the people they love, or if you have ever been given a second chance you never expected, please comment below and share your story with us. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Daniel and Alina's daughter grew up surrounded not by tension, but by a family finally at peace, proof that even the deepest wounds can heal when someone is brave enough to choose love over pride and humility over legacy. Sometimes the greatest inheritance a family can offer is not wealth, but the courage to change.